And
yes, I see people joining.
yeah.
So we're good to go?
Yeah, wait for a few minutes. Wait, by the time it climbs up to about 30, 40 or something like that, which will very soon, then we'll start. Let's give about a couple of minutes.
Sure.
We should put on some hold music, or we should have Ram sing us a different song at the beginning.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
If you're happy and you know it, join the Zoom.
Yeah. And if you want the session to close immediately and all the people running away from here, yeah, we can do that.
So no singing from you today, huh?
No singing from me today.
Okay.
It's only reserved for special occasions like the systemic coaching classes.
Oh, okay. Really? Are we missing something here, Ram? We're seeing a new you, is it?
Yeah, we will have you in. We are trying to get the group built. So maybe after the first about. What I want to show you all, guys, is that in 15 hours, people who are in that group will be coaching at PCC level. Okay, and that will happen. Yeah. Okay. And when they are ready, then we will call you to
okay.
see what's happening.
And we'll hear you sing.
Well, yes, of course we can.
Okay.
We can hear me sing. We can hear other people sing. Okay, hi guys. There are about 30 odd people here in the call. So today we have. There's a plane passing somewhere. Somebody's, yeah, please mute at that time if there's a disturbance. The session is going to be primarily on what is called the action markers in PCC markers. Markers 9, 10, 11, which are put together for action leading to planning and finally accountability. And I have requested Priya to include awareness too in that, because all 4 of them together in ICF terminology falls into that one bucket of how you move into action. So we have Priya here, who's going to lead today's learner webinar. Cindy is away in a kind of a conference cruise somewhere in Greece, enjoying herself. So Priya has a responsibility to run the session now. And she has a panel. She has got Ashwini here. She has got Rekha here. And probably we will have a couple of others, Anita and Rama. All 3 of them are MCCs. Rekha in the process of getting into MCC at this point in time. They will be joining as well. So as always, please use the chat box, and one of us will be monitoring the chat and then either invite you into the panel, or Priya would be taking care of all the answers. So Priya, over to you. We are being broadcast, all yours. I'll have to promote Rama. I'll promote Rama. She doesn't seem to have got into it. And I'll also look for who else.
Anita's
right? Okay, I'll do that. You carry on.
Yeah. So a very good evening, good morning, good night to everybody here on this call. And I'm happy to see we are 40 strong on this call. So this being a learner webinar, we're really looking at unpacking competency 9, 10, 11, which is around action planning. So as thoughts come up for you, do share on the chat. We'll try and answer some of the questions. We'll take up some, share some thoughts that are being shared there as well. So I have with me, of course, Anita and Rama, who were part of my MCC cohort. Rekha, who is actually going through her MCC journey. And we have Ashwini, who has just completed her ACC coach training program. This is just to get a wide perspective on how each of us are experiencing this competency of 9, 10, 11. So keeping that in context, I want to throw open a question to all of you as to what really, keeping 9, 10, 11 as the framework, what really defines, or what differentiates a conversation from a coffee table conversation to a coaching conversation? With this in mind, Happy to see your thoughts on the chat box. Please do share. What do you think? Coaching is intentional conversation. The focus on building commitment. Okay, let's hear some more. Commitment to outcome instead of catharsis. Okay. It's designed to facilitate change. Okay, any more? Moving forward structurally. Clear, actionable for clients. Creating awareness and clarity. Yeah, okay, so John has some confusion about 3 competencies, but they're clubbed as one. Yeah, John, we'll take that up. Accountability. Okay, so we here, keeping again the framework of 9, 10, 11 in mind, we see a lot of answers and thoughts being shared around commitment, outcome, actionable, moving forward structurally and all of that. So I just want to actually invite Ashwini here at this point. Ashwini, as a learner, how are you experiencing 9, 10, 11 as a competency? And what stood out for you in your journey?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Priya. So when I look at 9, 10, 11, with whatever few hours I have clocked in terms of practice, I see myself, getting 9, 10, 11 quite easy. And for me, as a coach, when I'm putting on that hat, is when I feel 9, 10, 11 comes quite naturally and easily. But at the same time, when I reflect back and look at the client, and when client has probably taken some actions, how it gets translated into real actions is where I have seen the difference. So where, whether that action really gets into an action. So that is where I feel for client, it is really, really difficult part to make it happen. So I could possibly pick an analogy. So, if you could put that picture up, Priya.
Sure.
Thank you.
Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is question to the group, who's on the call, to everyone. So this is a picture of rubber band. So what comes to your mind when you look at this rubber band? You could post your comments in the chat box. Flexibility. Options. Okay, you can possibly look at that picture as, there are multiple rubber bands there. You could just consider that as one rubber band. Color diversity. Yeah, so as I said, you can just
stretchable. I see stretchable, flexibility.
Yeah.
Okay. Keeping everything together.
Yeah. Potential.
Okay. Overstretching is harmful.
Yeah, a nice point.
So what is the rubber band to you, Ashwini?
Yeah, so somebody who called out there, which is stretchable, potential. So for me, when I look at rubber band, yes, elasticity is something which comes to mind. So when you look at rubber band, what are the different possibilities with a rubber band? So I'm sure you can put into multiple uses with rubber band. However, when you look at the way it is in the picture, so it is just stationary. So it is doing nothing. However, we see that, it has great potential to form into something different. So is able to probably set movement for an object. And hence, when the potential energy gets converted into kinetic energy is where the action happens. So how I relate to this, relate this example to coaching is, if you look at coaching, as coach travels with the client, so what happens is you establish goal and you do implore on beliefs and values, you create awareness. When all this is done and when there is a great insight, so which has happened to the client, and if it doesn't get translated into action, so it is nothing but a stationary rubber band. So which is nothing to do. So, and hence, how do you engage this potential energy into something which has multiple possibilities, multiple outcomes? And when we look at this awareness and translate that into actions, where we invite client accountability towards that action, is where I see, needle moving. Mm-hmm. And that is how, I look at this analogy towards 9, 10, and 11.
So thanks, Ashwini. And I think it's what you brought up is also very critical. Really, the coffee table conversation changes its texture and nature into a more structured conversation, a coaching conversation, when we are able to actually arrive, after goal clarification, of course, we are able to streamline and enable some awareness to develop in the client. And like you said, an awareness, if you actually look at research in neuroscience, the point of awareness actually releases a lot of energy. And this is also clearly explained in David Rock's book, Quiet Leadership, where you find that when a new synapse is created, there is a great release of energy. And this energy, if it is not garnished, might just end up wasted. So the awareness by itself really makes it fruitful and makes the whole conversation powerful only when it translates to action. Yeah, so John, the gamma rays, right? So it really is something that actually is harnessed only when actions come out of it. And that's very powerful. And we just had a chat with Ram before we started this, and he also brought in the concept that actions 9, 10, 11, the competency, where is the starting point? The starting point is really coming from competency 8, which is awareness, right? And it's from awareness that you can develop and build action plans. So Rekha, I know that I'm aware that you had some challenges around 9, 10, 11. So what has it, how has this changed, if at all, in your NCC journey? You're on mute, Rekha.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So what happened was, see, earlier 9, 10, 11, I used to look at it as a bunch that is to be done towards the end. And since 9, 10, 11 were not my personal favorites as a client, because I was, for me, getting an insight and becoming aware used to be enough to conclude the session. And then I would be like, okay, let me, digest this, let me mull over this, and then I'll do something eventually. So I think I've just projected my own way of being onto, my clients. And therefore, I didn't focus on 9, 10, 11. I used to kind of keep it towards the end, last 5, 10 minutes, somehow just do it. Okay. But what I'm seeing now is that if I link it together, I mean, if I just add it up together or stitch all the competencies together, then 9, 10, 11 actually very closely correlate with CC2 is what I'm realizing, I mean, if you look at it, we talk about accountability as one of the markers, and we're talking about what is important about this goal for the client. So if it is important, then it should translate into accountability. I mean, that's the kind of correlation I'm seeing now. Or when we're talking about closure, when we're talking about checking in with the client, whether the client has achieved the goal or not. So if the goal has been achieved, then the client is automatically going to be wanting to create the outcome, because the outcome is not happening in the session. In the session is only a realization of what is blocking. So action is what will carry the client towards accomplishing the goal which really the client wants, So I think there is more of an integration and co-relationship that is happening now. Like you start with CC2 and you end with 9, 10, and 11. And these two talk to each other. And therefore, you can't really miss out on them, is what I have realized. But I have some challenges subsequent to that, which maybe sometime, let's see how the session develops.
So Anita, do you want to come in and share what 9, 10, 11 is all about for you as a mentor coach?
Before I do the mentor coach part of it, I'd like to take on from what Rekha was talking about, which was when I used to see the client moving towards the action planning stage. With those clients that said, yes, I have this action plan and yeah, here are the dates and I'll do it, I felt good that, yeah, that's going to happen. Over time, I figured that it is more important to also kind of anchor and not just leave them at that action stage, relating back to the 3A model that Ram has designed. I think it kind of suddenly the pin drop moment was about, it's not enough to just get a client to the action stage, but how do you anchor that new habit? How can they repeat that action in multiple opportunities outside of the session? So it becomes a second habit then, right? It's a behavioral change. So that was a big moment for me to realize how to anchor and what does a third A mean in that model. The other one was really trying to look at stitching together the awareness, the way you said it, that awareness links to the action plans in 9, 10, 11. But I always struggled with that learning thing, that depending on the learning pattern of the client, how does the coach support in that process? And I struggled, and I love to keep it open at this stage to see what does everybody think about when it comes to applying the learning style of the client and helping them in the 9, 10, and 11. So comments on that? So it's quiet there. I'm not
Anita,
sure
do you want to
correctly? I might want to explain that better.
Right.
So what I was trying to get at is that there is this marker that says that the learning style, especially look at the awareness 8, it talks about the learning style of a client and what have they learned about themselves when that insight came up or they are suddenly aware of something about themselves. What have they learned about themselves and how does the situation now look any different? So let's assume that the client had this big awareness moment of, yeah, okay, I was not confident so far, maybe because of XYZ things. And there was a self-validation required, for example, from the client's perspective. And that's an insight. How do they now go towards a 9, 10, and 11 to take care of that? And how is their learning style coming up? So Vijay, you talked about the learning style being relevant. So do you want to just talk about that a little bit more? Yeah, Mohan, I can see that awareness growing and expanding totally. Could you talk more on that 9, 10, 11, please, from the awareness learning style? Yeah.
Okay.
So Deba can see that. Deba, you talked about the process of setting up the feedback loop on the progress made on the action plan.
Okay. Yes, Vijay. You're
So
on mute.
just while we get the other things coming up, yeah. Hey.
You're on mute, Vijay. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm clearly sort of unprepared for the call, but let me sort of say what's coming to me. So I'm a big sort of advocate of learning styles in general for coaching itself, and I find it very relevant when it comes to designing actions, progress, and accountability, and the 9, 10, 11 cluster, because I feel through the session it's important for the coach to either expressly or intuitively understand what kind of a learner this client is, and what does that help me with as a coach when I get a sense on that, whether this person is a big picture person, is he a nuts and bolts person, right? Is he a task list, action list kind of person? Is he the kind of person who, as Rekha said, needs that space to even sort of put down actions with milestones and goalposts? I think it just makes me a lot more sensitive and open to partner with my client. Because many times I've found in sessions, both when I've been a client and otherwise, is sometimes, the coach would have done it brilliantly till then, CC8, right? But in the last bit, right, they lose that chemistry, because suddenly from a very, very hard space, it moves into a very structured checklist kind of, what Rekha was saying, 9, 10, 11, let's sort of get it out of the way space. It doesn't work like that. So I think it's just important to understand the learning style. And let's say this client is a very, I would think a learner who is a very big picture kind of learner, right? I think then it's okay to just be very sensitive and maybe even give the space to the client, saying that would they want to come back to you on actions. I'm even okay with that, because ultimately the client has to be ready, right? So I find learning styles very relevant when it comes to that. And like John was saying, that's a brilliant point, right? I think it's very important. Actions keep emerging throughout the conversation. I would even say in the first 20 minutes, right? You never know. I think it's important for the coach to sort of make a mental note of those things and thread it together right at the end. Because not all learners are very structured in the way the core competency document has been structured, right? Actions and even accountability keeps popping up. I think it's important then, if your client is that kind of a learner, to thread it all together and offer it back to the client, instead of asking the client very fresh, saying, what kind of actions are the client would be like, hello, we've been talking about it. It's been emerging. Where is your sort of sensitivity on that? So it's much better than I pick it up and offer it to the client, saying that, I sensed, or I remember you mentioning these 3, 4 things. Are there other things you'd like to look at? Would you still want to sort of take and run with these? Would you want to work on these? I think build it in and offer it. So 2 very fundamentally great points by John and Anita about actions coming up through the session. And I think coach being extremely sensitive to the client's learning style.
Thanks, Vijay, for bringing it. Anita, if I can just add here. So one of the learning styles, right, would be somebody who says, I need time to think this through. And this is a question that Cindy also had posed at one point. I've had this myself, where I'm saying that I have this insight and, I see a beautiful picture in front of me. I want to close the session, right? So even in that, and this is a question to all the participants, what kind of actions are possible when a client is in this state?
Priya, can I just share a thought on that?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I myself am a client like that. So I think sort of let me put myself in the client's shoe and say what may work very well with a coach, and how can the coach continue that partnership. I think that's where, if I'm in a very reflective space, right, there is that bit on closure of the session, right. I think it's okay to broach closure and ask the client, offer it back to the client saying, that's fine, but so how do you want to close the session? What thoughts are coming to you? And oftentimes when a client like that, who's very reflective, who needs that space, is offered that, some amazing things come up, and they actually talk about further actions. And some, they may actually say that, I actually need maybe a plan to think about this in depth, or, some kind of a framework or model. Anything can come. So I think that bit, the 0.4 and 0.5 on 9, 10, 11 in the PCC markers, I think comes in very handy for me at that stage.
Sure, Vijay. I'll just also check in with any other opinions here on the chat.
Hi, Priya, can I
Yes,
jump
please.
in here? This is
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and for me, even the thinking is an action.
Yes.
So it is to say that, if they say the client comes in to say that I want to reflect, think on it. It would be urging them to think, oh, so when would you like to think about it? What parts would you like to think? And, do you need any support? Would you want to write about it? So, because that is also part of an action. Action is not something which has to be immediately physically done or do something. But an action is also how do you build on that insight or the awareness part of it. So it has to be about asking them, if they want to think about it, just, and that is part of the coach's part, that, you just don't leave it there, but have it built into a habit to ask them, when do you think you want to think about it? Because you want some accountability there. Yes. And that's part of 9 to 11 as well, that you're building accountability and giving them time to, I want to walk on the beach and think about it. Great. Do you need any support to remind you? Do you need to be recording?
There seems to be a little bit of a connectivity.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, it went fast. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, it's important that if somebody is reflecting and not just leave it. And to G's point about closure, I found with a couple of clients that this is also one of the things that they don't understand. If you say, how do you want to close? You may want to, just lead them to ask, what do you feel? Are you, so it has to be probably some other kind of terminology for them to get understanding of what it is, because they don't go by our markers as well. So we want them to think through, how the session has been for them. So it's good to use their language, what you've learned through that. Yeah. And the reflection, I think, is as a very important part of action for me.
So thanks, Rama, for highlighting that. And that is a very important point, that we often think of action as one big physical thing that you would do. However, it could be simply something like, yeah, I want to stay in this space. What will help you to stay in this place? What support would you need to stay in this space? So even those are action plans. Those are actionable items. It need not be a physical out there, go from tomorrow morning, I will start doing this. And I think that's a nuance that we often miss as learners in this journey, as to how do we anchor this kind of an awareness into action when the action seems pretty amorphous, but there is still action. And unless there is action, there is really it doesn't really conclude as a wholesome session. And that's very critical.
Absolutely. And that is part of the coaching, right? I mean, that's what you're doing. It's not, as you started by saying, it's not just a conversation with a friend, just leaving it at that.
Yes.
So it has to be about finding, getting, I mean, awareness is awesome, but what are you going to do with that awareness? How are you going to embed it? What is the habit that you're going to be forming? I think those are crucial points of coaching, because you are trying to see how they improve their way of thinking. How do they achieve what they want to be doing? So the achieving can be just, the thinking style can be modified, but that's important that as a coach, we hold them accountable, we challenge them, and we hold their hand to be giving those resources and the support. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Can I come in
Yes,
here?
Anita.
And
Sure.
watching the chat, and it's an interesting thing about the learning styles that is coming up. So Ram brought up the right thing in terms of saying that let's look at the Kolb's model. And I like to just throw that in from my understanding, so that we can see if it's all gravitating towards understanding the learning style of our clients. So Kolb basically had said that there is the processing and the feeling continuum, basically processing or some other continuum anyway, I forget the term now. But there is a doing person that is an active experimentation person who will just jump in and say, okay, I know I've thought about the actions, I will do it on this day, this date, right? The doing people. And then there is the watching person on the other continuum who says, okay, I have thought about these steps in my action plan, but before I jump in and do it, I want to watch and see maybe others do it. So he's not yet fully committed to jumping in and doing it, but he has an action plan in mind from the session. And then there could be the other ones that are in the feeling space that says, I'm just going to sit with this idea, the new awareness that I've found. I want to live with this for some time. And I want to be able to live with it so that I can look at what will I do next? I just want to bask in that, or I want to reflect later. So that's a person that will not want to commit to any action in that session or even beyond. They need time, as Rama was saying, to process themselves. And then there is this other kind of people that will be the people that will be the thinking people. And you learn from the way that they express themselves, that they'll want further thinking. They might do some more research. They might then want to look at doing some baby steps. So it's about hearing them fully and picking up the words that talk about it. Yes, John, it was Kolb, K-O-L-B, Mohan, thank you for that. Yeah, Komal, that's true, the perception and the processing continuum, yes. So you see that there are 4 different sets, and nothing right or wrong, is just the way that we are made up. And listening into the words of the client and how they design actions, whatever the actions mean, session over session, our intimacy with them grows. We understand our clients better, session on session. We know how they're planning on their actions, and that's the same pattern that you will see they would want to have for every goal. At least that's the way I've understood.
Thanks, Anita. I think this continuum is a great concept, and clearly relates to different styles of how people anchor awareness and how people action on it, right? It may not be the same for everyone. Ram, I see you on screen. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to start with what Anita had explained. I think it's extremely important, not purely from a learning style. I think for those of you who are probably not very familiar with learning style, it's easy. Look up Kolb, Knowles, even Peter Senge. There are many different models. But the beauty of all of them is that they're all cycles. Though we start looking at them as, hey, there is one particular learning style. Somebody is theoretical, somebody is abstract, another person is concrete, somebody is pragmatic, somebody is practical. These are reflections of our own behavioral patterns in some ways, personalities, and so on. By the same logic, the 3A model, which is based on this whole shift from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence to unconscious competence, is also a cycle. It doesn't just end with unconscious competence. You don't just stay there, because once you stay there, you encounter something else, and that creates another unconscious incompetence in you, and you keep moving forward. So I would like all of you, I would invite you to look at the whole coaching process also as a cycle. Some of you are looking at, how do I close this? Even death is not a closure. For heaven's sake, a coaching session is not a closure. You are ending at a point, and that is going to be a segue into opening up another session. And that is how you should look at every coaching conversation. So the end of a session could become potentially the starting point of another session that you are starting. And if you look at it from that perspective, right from the time that you start defining what is that session goal that you want to achieve, and like Rekha so well said, the measure of success is going to lead to a confirmation, have you reached the awareness or not? Or do I need something more? As Mohan says, it needs to mature, but it can pretty well mature in a session. For most people, it does. And then from there, if you look at importance, that leads to a commitment. And when you look at 2.4, issues to be addressed, you have a feeling, have we addressed all the issues, and so on. And the whole thing comes together as a point of awareness in the double hourglass model. That is where the second hourglass sort of converges into this point where the CC8 happens. And there is really not much difference between when the awareness happens for it to lead to action. Because as I think probably she didn't intend it, Ashwini, when she put up that rubber bands and stuff like that, it's almost like the awareness is a point at which you have all that energy which is stored, and it has to manifest itself into something moving on. Look at it this way. If you move from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, you can't stay with that conscious incompetence. It'll give you ulcers. You will have to do something to move from that conscious incompetence to a conscious competence. That is human nature. Even animals would do it. Humans would do it. Look at it from that perspective. So you are always going to move to a point which is more stable. Incompetence is not a stable position. Competence is a stable position. So you will start moving there. So the awareness has to lead to action. And it doesn't mean that it has to be physical action. In a session, there is no physical action. If somebody wants to get promoted, somebody wants to lose weight, they're not going to do it in that session. So what you're really doing in your mind, you're creating certain plans. How am I going to do it? What is it that is going to happen? What is it that's going to stop me? How do I move forward? And that is all that you are really doing. And somebody used this word here, I don't want to jump into practice. You're not jumping into any practice here. You are just preparing your mind. You're actually visualizing, how do I convert that awareness into action? So try to reframe it like this and see how this works for you. Then probably there's a much easier movement in the coaching conversation to the action points. And as John said, yes, it can happen anytime. But the only thing that we need to be careful about is, if at too early a stage, if we start leading the client into the action kind of points, it's not going to be sufficient awareness for the person to do that. So you've got to be very clear in your mind that the client and you have partnered in terms of looking at those various things that need to happen in order for that awareness to happen. Vanessa is here today. I mean, yesterday we had a session with her, and one of the beautiful questions that she asked me when I was explaining about 2.4, that this is about barriers that happen. We were talking about a situation of promotion, for example. What are the things that are stopping you? And she asked, and she's just started her journey, and she asked a question, why should I look at the barriers? Why can't I ask the question, what is it that will help you get promoted? I thought it was absolutely brilliant. We don't have to look at it as barriers or obstacles. What is it that needs to happen is also a 2.4. And if you start working towards it, the awareness will happen in a much more positive way. There are multiple ways that we can address this. We can peel the onion. So I'll just stop here. Yeah.
So I just want to pick up from the 2.4 that you spoke about, Ram. And, I have seen a lot of coaches struggle, or rather, when the clients answer the question on 2.4 as to what's coming in the way, what do you need to resolve or address, typically you will have a group of clients who move into action words. I will do this, I will do that. This is what I need to do. And it's very easy. I just want to bring this up here because it's very easy as a coach for us to fall into that trap and say, oh, this is the action. Without an exploration, without awareness, without expanding the horizon through powerful questioning, it really doesn't amount to action. And this is something that happens very often. So just wanted to highlight that, and again invite the participants, asking you what of the 9, 10, 11 is the most challenging for you? We have designing actions, we have accountability, we have support system, we have closure. What may be some of the things that come in the way of you actioning it? Which of these 6 out of the 9, 10, 11 is the most challenging for you? Mohan, support is a tricky thing, isn't it? Yeah. And do you want to also put in what makes it tricky? Yeah, any more staying committed to the commitment. Okay. I think clients often create large actions in the enthusiasm of the moment, creating appropriate balance in terms of scale of action. Okay. So, Ramcharan, so the question you're asking here is true. There's a lot of gush and enthusiasm and motivation to get into an action space, and it could be overwhelming at a point. My direct answer to that would be, out of the very many actions, when we ask them about, when we anchor each one of them, then perhaps they'll be in a better position to choose what action is practically possible and what they want to do immediately. And it's always encouraging if you start with low-hanging fruits, right? So that's how I see we can deal with that. Okay, so I'm just, there's a lot of answers coming. Accountability is difficult. You find that intrusive. Prefer the client to design his or her own action support system, but often this takes some creative thinking. Yes. So when you talk about support mechanisms, I think also it might be important to keep in mind that sometimes the support may be a book, sometimes it is some person, sometimes it is just them thinking through. It's really about articulating in the coaching conversation what those support mechanisms are and brainstorming around that, because that gives a sense of, see, when there is a challenge, yeah, and taking action takes a lot of courage. And it's good to know that there is some sort of a support that they can get, even if it is within themselves, and articulating that into very granular form to be able to tide through that thought to action. Okay, Siddhi says, for me, offering support is tricky because it feels fake. So we're talking about offering our own support. So that's another question, right? How much the coach is able to support. How do we manage that without it becoming micromanaging, us getting intrusive, right? Good question to ask. Priya Venkateshan, that's interesting. When they say I should, I must, an idealistic way of looking at actions, not really what the person is willing to do. This we get a lot, isn't it? When clients say, "I must do this," you know, I should really get up and start my exercise regime. Yeah. So it's really about putting them in that uncomfortable space to say, okay, so if it should and if it must, what is it that you're going to do about it? What was worked for you in the past? Okay. I think anchoring the awareness helps the client to take actions without being overwhelmed. Yes. Okay. Am I missing anything, Anita? It's beautiful to see so many people, so many answers out here.
I will add in something that one of my previous batches of learners said. They said that they find it very difficult in typical Indian culture, they said, to invite the client to close the session. They said it felt like, you know, when you invite people for dinner and when the guests are going away, it's an elongated process in India to say, okay, bye, okay, thank you, okay, why did you come? Okay, then blah, 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 right? So it seemed to the whole group, and it was really hilarious when you're thinking about that and saying, so how do you invite a client as a coach to close a session and do it without it seemingly jarring? You know, you had a very nice heart space conversation, and suddenly it's like, okay, so we're on the top of the hour, and then they were struggling with what is to be done. So I thought I'll kind of bring that up as a.
That's interesting, isn't it? It's the cultural orientation of not being able to say a goodbye in that sense, right? For this session.
Yes, yes. Or else in asking the thing about, so how are you feeling? You know, or was the session useful for you? So, you know, those kinds of things were popping up because the closure was not seemingly nicer.
So, Ashwini, you shared that 9, 10, 11 as a competency is fairly, you're pretty comfortable doing that. So any thoughts on how you would invite the client to close?
Yeah, so in my practice sessions, and you know, I think some of the conversations I have done at work as well. So when I have conversation, I think, you know, as Ram and you nicely pointed out, that, you know, it is important to stay with that awareness. So, and I think that's the space I stay in for some time. So when I stay in that space is when naturally things come out as, you know, because there is a state of awareness to say, so this is what I've thought about my goal. And as I started exploring my goal and my beliefs about it, so there is certain amount of awareness which is created, and more you get deeper into it is when naturally, you know, some of these things come out to say, these are the bit which I need to action on, or these are the bit which I need to focus on. And as someone earlier pointed out, so there is, even during the goal establishing session, the first hourglass, is where some of the actions would still pop up. But at that point in time, if we anchor those actions, what I feel personally is that is premature, because then that might reflect on the client not being accountable for those actions, because there is still awareness needs to be created. So hence, so, you know, for me, when there is a point where awareness has been created, or there is deep insight into what has caused this, you know, what are some of my beliefs, and getting into the past. So the moment that happens is when I translate that into, you know, how do you want to move that forward? Now that, you know, you have this learning, how do you want to take that forward? Is when it naturally translates into action. So for me, you know, that is how it has worked.
Okay.
And the bit, you know, which I struggle with is the actions is signed up by the client, and then so when you do a follow-up conversation, yes, that was a great session. I had great awareness, and you know, these are some of the actions which I've taken. But where are you now? is very, and that is the reason I took that analogy to say that, yes, there is a great potential and you're aware of that potential, but what have you done with that? So how do you translate that into action? So, and that is where probably, I look at others in the panel or probably in the learners group itself to say, how do we keep that accountability on? How do we facilitate that accountability with the client to be on?
So accountability is, again, came up in a couple of others who are struggling with that same piece as to how do you keep it between sessions? And what I'm also hearing you say is, how do we pick it up in our next session? So how much is it the coach's responsibility to ensure that the client stays accountable?
I guess it is important. Then you know that the needle is moving, and I think in stage I'm in with the coaching journey, I feel if the client is moving is when the client feels invested. So I'll just go on.
Okay. So Rekha, do you have any thoughts on this? How much is it the responsibility of the coach to ensure that the client remains accountable? That's your 9, 10, 11.3. You're on mute, Rekha.
So sorry. So 11, I was just looking at 11 in detail, and 11 is actually all about checking on past actions and what has the client learned by taking the actions and what by not taking the actions. So I think that since it's a partnership, in the true spirit of partnership, I think that taking actions is the responsibility of the client, but knowing and being invested in the actions that are being taken by the client, I think is also the responsibility of the coach. That's what I feel. And in the follow-up session, when we are checking on whether actions have been taken or not, my experience has been that very often the actions have not been taken. So someone had raised a point about being committed to commitment. But what I feel is that has actually been an opportunity for a great session to open up, because there is a whole lot of learning over there, that by not taking those actions, what has the client actually learned? I have found those way more valuable for the client than actions having been taken, because it is something more deep that opens up. It allows for a further exploration. And and therefore I feel that the actions of the client, taken, not taken, learning, not learning, impact, consequences, in terms of being interested as a partner, I think the coach is responsible.
So it's a great point, Rekha, that you're saying. Rama, you've come in, you want to say something?
No, I just want to add on to what Rekha was saying. I think it's really important to, when they say they didn't do the action, to also look at it positively, to say not just on what did you learn about not doing it, but about did you have a time to reflect on it? What did you think? So that they also know that there is something that they have done partially. And there's great learning which comes to say that, oh, maybe I took on too much. So that's a learning which comes by asking them, what did you learn by not doing? But even when they have done the action, it's a good point to ask. It's really helpful to ask, is there any learning? Because, sometimes they've taken on really challenging actions, which is not habitual for them. So if they have taken on, how was that for you? How would you like to make that into a habit? So using those for sure to check on, I think John or somebody mentioned about asking what the past agreed actions are. I think it's really important to be asking them and not just leaving it, because if they say, yeah, I did the actions and this is this is what I did, not leave it to that. But coaching is not just about doing those actions, but it's also an emotional journey and growth for them. So how would you want to embed that? I think that's really crucial.
And I think it's a great opportunity for us as coaches to also dip into, create awareness around that piece. So you may have a client repeatedly, perhaps, committing to action, but not really, doing it, so to say.
Absolutely,
And you can start off a conversation asking, so what is it that you're learning about yourself that, you commit and you struggle with that? So what is it, what's happening? So that could be an opening for some new awareness as well. That question could be quite thought-provoking for the client. I mean, answer could be anything, but it could also be that, I really find it hard. I think I overcommit, for example.
Priya?
Yes.
I had a slightly different perspective on your question, if I may share.
Sure.
So, I mean, if you go back to the competency document, right, I think Levin is explained, if I recollect, it very clearly says that the coach's role is to hold attention on what's important for the client. Right? So whatever the themes the client wants to discuss, what's important, right? That, I think that focus and holding them accountable for that focus is definitely part of the client's role, the coach's role in CC11. But I think the responsibility for taking action and trusting the client to do that is entirely with the client. So I think there is a difference between action and holding attention on what is important. So while the coach's role is very active on the first and staying focused on that, the bit about taking responsibility for the action is with the client. That's the way I see it.
Thanks, Vijay. I was also reminded as we were speaking about one of the sessions I've had when we started off with what actions were committed to last session, and we opened up from there. And here was a person, I mean, it was a great learning for me. Here was a person who was talking elaborately about the actions that he has taken. And somewhere well into, say, 10 minutes of the conversation, I realized somewhere intuitively that this is probably what he wants to talk. So I checked in as to what might be the goal for the session, and we went through that process. And he just wanted to talk about the actions that he has taken. So that became the goal for that session. And it was interesting because here is the learning style. I'm connecting it back to our earlier conversation about learning style. His learning style is, as he talks about the actions he has taken, he's anchoring the learning, the awareness for himself. And for me, that was a beautiful session, beautiful learning this client enabled for me with regard to 9, 10, 11, and how we opened up for the next session. So magic happens, and I think it's just us being open to when and where it happens, and validating it, anchoring it for the client. So he picks up the courage to go out there and do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point, Priya. And as John mentioned earlier in a different context, I think mastery in this is also about, when you call out accountability, when some things don't happen, it's a loving calling out. And I think that's the fine line that makes this so beautiful, in terms of progress and the way to do it, right? So it's not about saying, it's not demanding, or it's not sort of, challenging, but I think it's a loving calling out, even if there hasn't been progress on accountability.
Thanks, Vijay. So we are nearly on top of the hour. Quickly, if all of you can put in one word that stood out for you in this particular competency or conversation, love to see that. Yeah, any, am I seeing anything? Yes. Anchoring, awareness. Nuance of the marker. Learning styles. Dialogue. Perspective. Nice. Great to hear from so many of you out there. And yeah, sure, some questions may not be, may not have been answered. Do write in for your questions, and if however we can do that, we can do it one-on-one or with Ram or any one of us here on the panel. Thank you so much for being here. And
Priya, before we close, what is the password? I think Magda sent it to you.
Yeah, there is. I'm just picking it up. Right.
Okay. While Priya is figuring out what the password is, thanks all of you for joining us today. Thanks, Priya. Thanks the entire panel, Ashwini, Rama, Rekha, and Vijay, and Anita. It's been a great session. Just one closing word. You got it, Priya?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm just checking on it.
Because otherwise they would have a problem in getting there.
Yeah. Just a minute, Ram. Yeah, so we could probably send it across.
No, because it's I don't think the system allows that. So
yeah, so if I just request everyone to just hang on for a couple of minutes more before I pick this up, because it seems to have sort of got lost.
So it's Radiant.
Yes.
Radiant Orchid.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Thanks a lot, Rekha. So it's Radiant Orchid, and
there it is.
Yeah. And if there is if you can cut paste, Rama, if you're on it, Magda has sent the link. If you can put that down as well on the chat box, people can go to that Think Click or whatever site, so that they would be able to probably do that. I think they usually all people who have registered would be getting a mail, and if it is replied, but it's better to put that link as well. Otherwise, you will have to go back to Magda. I just want to leave you one thought. I know that ICF very clearly says, and somebody else pointed out, it is not the coach's responsibility.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very, very theoretical way of looking at it. I mean, if the coach goes around saying it's not my responsibility, I don't think anybody is going to give that, any jobs to the coach. At the end of the day, the coach has to perform. So the coach has to find a way how to motivate the client. It's not that the coach is responsible or accountable, or the coach can force the client into accountability. But at the end of the day, the coach has to have that ability to be able to motivate the client into moving into action, not just stay in the awareness, and anchor that action so that it segues and move towards a final point where the client achieves whatever the client has declared to be goals. Somebody pointed out, yeah, what if the goals change? Sure, then redo that with the client. That is what the game is about. If goals always keep changing, they don't remain the same. So just want to keep it in mind. It's not a theoretical exercise. The reason why the ICF competencies end with a 9, 10, 11, for some of you, it may be difficult to say. You don't have to offer support to the client. The support question is about what support does the client need to be able to move forward. That's all that it means. And when you're asking about accountability, you don't have to hit the client on the head with a hammer. All that you're really asking is, hey, in order for you to stay committed, in order for you to anchor what you have become aware, what you plan now, what is it that you need to do? So there are much gentler and softer ways, like Priya talked about, paraphrasing John Sissing, lovingly, respectfully, politely, gently, multiple ways of asking that question. It's a way of asking that question that matters, not the word itself. So I just would leave it there, because for many of us, that last 9 to 11 has always been a bit of a bugbear. And believe you me, and when you are really moving on to the mastery journey, the two areas which usually people have to struggle with and not necessarily always assessed well on are the CC2s and the CC9s. So that is where those of you who are eventually planning to move towards that game, you need to be careful that you understand what those competencies mean, not let your judgment cloud as to what you would like to see out of it. Like Rekha said, as a client, I was uncomfortable being asked about those questions. But that has to shift when you are a coach. How do I help the client? Because you may have, Rekha may have had a trainer or a coach who probably in some way got that feeling, hey, I'm holding you responsible for this. And if you don't do it, I'm not going to let you go, or something of that sort. And that doesn't help. But you can move into 9, 10, 11 in a much more gentle, fluid, beautifully supportive way. So just leave you with that. Take care, all of you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rama. Thanks for putting it down. And thank all of you. Thanks, Priya, and the whole team. Wonderful.
Thank you, Ram.
Great. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.